one of the useful things about economics is that it can help us understand why societies collapse. Of course, there's other disciplines that help us to do that. History itself, geography, but economics also helps us to do that. You look at the collapse of slavery as an institution, can be associated and explained very well by changes in economic circumstances of the colonial countries versus the colonized countries. And then that becomes a political phenomenon, or those things happen together. I don't think it's very easy to separate these things out sometimes. But economics helps us to understand that collapse. So I think there is no doubt that society will evolve. If that means that global capitalism will collapse, I'm not sure. There are certainly, and I think COVID-19, the pandemic, has demonstrated that certain aspects where you have less government involvement, where you have a great deal of kind of laissez-faire in a sense, is not necessarily very helpful for dealing with these sorts of issues, for dealing with a pandemic where you have to be thinking about protecting other people and other people have to be thinking about protecting you. An economic discipline that encourages individualism, an economic framework that does that, is not necessarily going to be very helpful. So, but I don't think that necessarily means that global capitalism itself will necessarily collapse. I think it just means it definitely needs to evolve. And if it can evolve, then that will move. And I think the means of evolution will be through us, as economists and others in other disciplines coming together to think, what can we do next? How do we evolve? How do we understand this crisis? How do we use the information that we got from this crisis to be able to update our thinking and our models, for example, about which countries are better at doing things than others, or which types of societies are better at doing things than others. It was very clear, for example, my firm, we started working very early on to track COVID-19 in African economies. And what was very interesting was, as we did so, you look at what had been forecast through, what felt like very clear frameworks of, richer countries will clearly be able to certainly have stronger health systems and, certain types of governance, which will mean that they will deal with the pandemic much faster. There was a global preparedness index which came out literally just before COVID. And the result, and even within African economies, the result was completely different. We found that the countries which were at the bottom of that list were actually the ones that in many cases actually dealt very well with COVID-19, or might have been expected, to deal badly, and it was completely the other way around. That kind of information, we need to reflect on it. It's not just something that we should say, oh, okay, yes, that happened, and just go back to using our old risk models and thinking of the world in that very kind of linear sense of you're rich, therefore you can do everything. No, we need to use that to look at, well, what was wrong with those frameworks? What was wrong with those indices? And how do we adjust them? And how do we then have, the countries that did do well, even if they were poorer, how do they share lessons with others? And that's actually also something that economics can help us to do. We can look at we can use economic models to do that. There's no reason why we can't. We just need to adjust them with the appropriate information.